And once again, we are here on Living in the 21st Century. Joining me here today is the COI Consulting Group. First, we have the president, Dr. Sam Coy, also the CEO, Dr. Christopher Lasseter. And from the Haitian Community, Everett Community Center, we have Reverend Merlin Doris. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Derosier. Okay. Well, first of all, Reverend, I want to ask you a little bit, a few questions on immigration since our last conversation. I would have asked you if you had anything to say to the president, and you said no, but you would have preferred Congress to act. And the reality is that Congress did act, and they had a bipartisan bill, basically, that could go for the TPA recipients and DACA. And for some reason, President Trump threw it in the basket. There was no use. All because he didn't get what he wants, to build a humongous wall around the perimeters of the United States. So my question is to you today, considering all of that, and today it is no different, we still have those who are on DACA and those with the TPA still wondering what's coming next. They can't get ahead with their lives because of the conflict and obstacles that are before them. Is there anything today, since Congress would have acted before, is there anything today specifically that you would want to mention to the president in regard of DACA and TPA?
Well, as always, thank you for inviting me. It's always such a delight to come to New TV, living in the 21st century, and join you. And I am very honored and blessed to be amongst this group of doctors.
Thank you.
Here. What a great group that you've brought together to talk about something that's so very important, very deep, especially in our communities. And yes, indeed, the last time we chatted, right? I did say that it really is incumbent upon Congress to really come to a comprehensive immigration decision. And I still believe so, and I still believe that it's not just Congress, it's really the president. They need to he really need to step up and really try to curb this crisis that we have now, not only at the borders, but also throughout cities and states. But I think at the heart of this as well, beyond Congress and even the president. And one of the reason also the president, I would assume still is a stand ground. It's also the fact that he knows that he not only his base, but also he has a base beyond his political party. And I think I've said that many times. If you, based on a lot of research that has been done, you will find even beyond the Republican Party, and especially in terms of the immigrant issues, you have a lot of Democrats, that stand opposed to support immigration. You have Democrats who are state representatives, who are mayors, who stand against safe communities, and they get away with it. So when you have, even within the party that says that they support immigrants, and that have most of their support from the immigrant constituents, right? And they're also the ones that support the president's position on immigration. So even if Congress brings, comprehensive immigration reforms, well, you also have a president that is given great power and tools to stand ground. And so it's not just the president, like I said. So it still needs, a lot of heart, soul searching, from all parties to come together and know that this is not just an immigrant issue; it's a human rights issue.
Absolutely. Can I jump in and just make a comment? One of the things that I just wanted to put out there is, as you say, it's not just it's a civil rights, it's a human rights process. A lot of times our president will focus on the bad that comes with people coming into this country. Right. And that's where he gets a lot of his support, by putting out some of that fear mongering that happens. Right. And then you have policies, immigration policies that are pushed based on some of those false accusations and mythologies, if you will. And you have good people who want to come into this country and do well and serve it well and, you know, be productive citizens, but are met with all of this, you know, stop at before you can even get in here and live a life where you have the basic human rights that you deserve and the promise that this country gives to people who are here. We know the United States to be a melting pot. Since when was that not the case anymore? And this is something that I think Congress and the presidency has forgotten in their positions of keeping this country great again, if you will, right? And so if you're going to move in that direction, let's honor that. And let's honor what this country has always been built on, which is people coming over here and being able to live a life that is promised to us all that live here.
Right, absolutely.
Well, one of the things, and I'm going to ask you this, Dr. Coy, for the reason that you have your eyes set on being running for president in 2020.
I do. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a few presidential questions. Now, you can see clearly, and there's no doubt, that Trump isn't just only against immigrants, those who come here illegally or so forth. He's against both immigrants and the illegal immigrants. As a matter of fact, so much for so, he referred to those countries where predominantly black as shithole countries.
Yes, I've heard this.
This is the reality. It shows the stench and hatred that he has for these countries. Now, should you and when you decide to run for president, what are things you would do different when it comes to immigration opposed to what's going on now? We see kids in cages at the border. They rip away from their parents' hand. They are not being put back together. There's a lot of chaos. We've got kids dying in custody. The chief immigration officer, or whoever she is undermining the integrity of the Constitution of the United States and not giving these people a fair chance at human rights.
Indeed.
And they're simple refugees that trying to find the way out. They're not people come here to harm us as they want it.
As they'll have you believe.
Exactly. So what would you do, and what policies would you put in place in a situation like this?
Well, first, I can't even imagine what a policy would do to a country that doesn't guarantee the safety of children. First, there is no policy that you could ever put in place that would be beneficial to anyone where you're taking children from their parents. This is part of what we've seen happen in the United States way back into slavery times. It's just a repetition of what we've seen happen, where you're separating people, you're separating children from their families when all they have is the basic right to come and to be able to live and survive. In the aspect of the comment of the shithole countries, if we will, this is something that continuously divides us as a nation and as a nation in a continuum of a global perspective. We have to be able to work together and be diplomatic, if you will, with other countries. You can't start out good relationships with disrespecting other countries and think that we can all work together and live in harmony. First of all, I have to say there is something to be said for being in a position of power and having the ability to bring people together.
Yes.
And when you take that and you use that as a way to separate, there's no way that we as a nation can stand alone. We are a superpower. I think we have some great things here in America. Is why people want to come.
Right.
But we have to be able to still honor the fact that these are human beings that we're talking about.
Correct.
And no matter where they come from, these are still human beings who are capable and functional and can bring their smarts and their brains and their depth and their width to make this country as great as it can possibly be. And you cannot do that by discounting and dismissing people who can come and really help us out.
Exactly.
We have an entire nation in which we're trying to innovate. We're trying to become technologically advanced. There are great minds out there. You'll never know it if you don't allow for people to come in and show us what it is that they have to offer this country.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Christopher Lasseter, I'm going to hear from you in a few minutes. Now, here's the thing. We saw seriously the undermining of the integrity of civil rights in this country. And on one other hand, we are hearing the president stating that the economy is booming and everything look good. But the reality, there are so many people out there that is uncomfortable, not only in terms that they can't afford a life insurance, not a life insurance policy, they can't afford health insurance. the companies out there still finding ways. Yeah, the employment is up, but they are not getting insurance. They're hiring them per diem and so forth. How will this really impact the civil integrity of humanity existing in America, a nation that's supposed to be one of the wealthiest nations on the planet?
So it's all about the measurements. What measurement tool are we using to calculate the data and produce these outcomes? When we look at the GDP, gross domestic product is measured only by a certain sliver of commodities. It doesn't take into account the full wealth of the country. When we look at the wealth of the country, we know in America it's held by less than 1% of the population. So while there may be billions of dollars in the pot, it's not in circulation. It's being hoarded by a few. And in looking at how every economic system around the world has been built, my research shows that it's all been built on the back of small business, business owners. And without that level of competition and availability for funds, when we look at the EEOC, when we talk about equal opportunity, I mean, where's the equality? When we're being asked to highlight our eye color, our hair color. What does that have to do with the performance of my duties on the job?
Or your qualifications of coming in.
And let alone the qualifications.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and maybe Dr. Cole, you can answer this one. The president had given the wealthiest corporations here in America a humongous tax break. And they're all boasting on their profits and what they make, and they're rejoicing at it. And you know what's one of the most surprising things? In these said very companies, the employees now are either getting decreasing hours, which means they lose out now on insurance because they are not qualifying to get insurance.
Right, they're not full-time.
The management is now insulting staff members and employees alike and using all kind of racist remarks. Oh, well, if you can't do the job, someone else would do it.
That's right.
Now, you got a person who just lose probably from 40 hours to 32 hours, who had a good insurance plan, but the insurance gone. They got some medical problems they got to deal with. They can't focus on the job that they're doing, but your boss will say, well, if you can't do the job, someone else will find it. And that's true. Someone else is going to find it. Some young person or the school is going to find it and work for a lot less, and they themselves may not even get insurance. They may go on the system. I mean, as a person potentially running for president, would you, or do you think it was right to give that humongous tax breaks to these wealthy corporations, knowing fully well it's going to build their profits, but they can care less about employing more people? It's true they employ more people, but at what cost? They employ more people and pay them a whole lot less, and get rid of the ones who were brain burden opposed or assumingly burdened to their company by getting a full pay pack and benefits. Because all across the board now, benefits are getting taken away from employees. What would you do in this case?
You know, it's interesting. I can tell you, tax breaks are important. I mean, it's just an integral part of the economy and how this country runs. However, there are certain benefits that happen that serve the advantage versus the disadvantage. And what we see happen all the time is these deliberate attempts to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Of course.
Right? And so it's a trickle down. And if you're in a job and you're saying, and these corporations are saying to employees, well, if you don't like this job, then you can go. This is a very intentional thing. Because this is a way to push people out and get in people who they want to be in those positions. Mainly people of color get pushed out because they're continuously they're not in positions of power. And this is something that Dr. Lasser and I talk about all the time about education and why it's important to go to school and why it's important to be positioned so that you can be at the table to make decisions, so that you are not so easily pushed out, so that you have a voice and you have a say. Well, they have to let you in at the table because you have all the credentials and you have the answers. You are considered an expert in this, and you can start to change the trajectory of our policies that get handed down that says that it's okay if you're an employee at will to let them go. These are things that are and I submit to all of you, are deliberately put in place to keep the powers that be where they are. And that has to change.
So, great points. And this is something that we volley all the time. My business acumen, in especially when looking at entrepreneurs and startup businesses, we know competition is what drives business. In terms of being competitive in business, if there's few jobs available and you're being, I have close friends that still live in Alabama and they work, and throughout the state, you'll go to any place and see a group of minority employees, and if there's one European American or white American in the building, they're going to be the manager. They'll be the one holding the position of power or the position to make decisions and call shots. What you spoke about earlier, forcing people to give away their integrity, give away their self-respect in order to stay to get a check, is something that's pervasive throughout the country. But what people know is what we're facing is an individualism versus a collectivism worldview.
Indeed.
Right.
When we learn how to, well, I shouldn't say learn. When we become brave enough to say, some of the old adages of the civil rights movement, no justice, no peace, or injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Yes.
We'll be able to move the pendulum like we did in a massive way during the 1960s with Dr. Martin Luther King and those that were instrumental in making progress at that time. The facts that remain are we are in a situation where our youth are now falling under the same distractions, the same misconceptions and preconceived notions that we're inferior. When I taught at an 85% Hispanic population school district, my question to them is, what is a minority? Just by definition, what is it? What is a minority? And the answers that I would get back from them didn't have anything to do with numbers.
Right.
It had to do with people and race.
Yes.
Because that message goes out, and before children can understand what that means, they are already under an umbrella of inferiority.
Right.
So when they move about into the world, of course you'll take a low-paying job. Okay. Of course you'll be okay with being second, third class. One last point. I asked these are primarily Hispanic individuals. Something that I learned in teaching them. When you come to a country and you don't know the language, the only jobs that you'll get are the jobs that don't require communication. Exactly. Those are usually low-level blue-collar jobs. I know from my history in Alabama, the jobs that Black Americans had were jobs in the plant and doing lawn care, and the women would watch children, nurse children, and clean homes. Fast forward, the Hispanic community coming in, a lot of the students are what they call ESL. The jobs that they have, construction job, hand and tool, lawn care. Okay. The females, they're watching children or they're cleaning homes, cleaning hotels. It's the same cycle. The break is education. Yes. In that education comes power. In that power is where you reserve the right to not be subjugated, but to empower yourself by starting your own business.
Okay. Reverend Milan, I hope I pronounced your name right. Okay. So here's the thing. One of the biggest lies had been told to immigrants for a long time, and that was that immigrants came here and take away the Americans' jobs.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Illegal immigrants came and take away the good paying
paying jobs.
Right. Now, I mean, it was one of the biggest lies told to absent-minded people.
Right.
That's right.
You don't have a social security number, you ain't getting no good paying job, period. Now, the same politicians utilize some of the same, including Donald Trump, by the way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Use some, say, illegal immigrants to work for next thing to nothing. All right. Political time, they use illegal immigrants as a footstool, a football to kick around. Oh, they come and steal your jobs, they do this and they do that. When in essence, illegal immigrants had made a significant contribution to this economy. For those who pick fruits and do this and do that, they create wealth in the domestic, for the gross domestic product, the excessive amount got export, create wealth in the gross national product, which bring in funds to the economy. When the Western Union, their money's back to their families, they make money, and when they shop at the supermarkets and the clothes stores, they're contributing to taxation indirectly. All right, so they made a significant contribution. As a person who fight for immigrants in this country, what word or words would you want to say to those who may feel inferior because of this consistent repetitiveness in their minds that, oh, I'm an immigrant and I'm taking somebody's job, and they think they have to settle for the less and not elevate themselves and look for the best? What would be your word of inspiring these people to go from there?
Well, it's really all people, and we all contributors to this country. And immigrants, I mean, it's, would be redundant to say that, the contributions of immigrants, to this country, to this land, everybody knows that. And, and in the United States, everybody's an immigrant. The president, he's, third generations, are immigrants. His wife is an immigrant. But I'm not pinpointing specific to the president or some part of the policies a lot are, I think, are very cruel. Okay. Yet at the same time, I think everybody has a role. I think I've said that over and over, that we all have a role to play in different various aspects of making it better for not only for immigrants but also for everyone living here. I wanted to tap a little bit on what was said before in regards to for example, very valid point that what is a minority? What are minority groups, and what are the roles that we can play? But the self-determination is also very important, and I'll be very real. Let's talk about immigration just for a minute. Yes, the President of the United States, some of his policies, I would say very cruel, especially in terms of at the border and some, and the negativity that many of his policies are generating against various groups. Nonetheless, and I want to bring this, there are a lot of also part of the policy that the Conservative Party have in general, really pertaining to immigration. And for years it's been proven that it's usually against a Republican conservative administration where you have amnesty, never under a Democratic administration. Never under Democrats. And I want to make sure, because sometimes we get lost in this immigration issue, because sometimes it can be so cruel, Democrats against Republicans or presidents against another president. And I'll be sure, Obama, our very first black president, had the opportunity to change all this around for immigrants. He did not. He did not. And now you have an administration under which policy is also cruel for immigrants. However, here's the thing. The reason also why we see that, even Congress with the presidents want things that are so outrageous, and you have Congress says that I'm not going to give you that much because it's too much, okay? And he's playing hardball, and he wants all the money that he can, to build the military and so forth. So he's playing hardball. And one of the reasons that he has the opportunity to play hardball is because our president, our past president, the very first black president that we had, who had the opportunity to make that change, he had the power within the first 2 years. He did not. Secondly, when we have what you see in terms of policies, under the programs that are also provided by, the Democratic Congress, is that yes, it opens the door for immigrants to be safe in their communities. Yes, it opens the door for immigrants to have access to benefits and so forth. But what it does, you'd see in terms of the visas provided. Under the conservative administrations, you'll see visas are given for people to come here legally. More visas are given. On the the Democrats' administrations, less visas are given. So we need to take into consideration it's not a question of party. It's really a question of us as a people coming together and look at people as people. Not otherwise, we will always be in the middle. I'm sorry, always be in the middle where we are played by Democrats and Republicans. We need to really make this not a party issue, but rather as a people with self-determination, where do we stand? In the context of jobs, in the context of possibilities, I would say, and this is very close to my heart, and it's not divisive, and I truly hope for conversation in this. And I always look at it this way, and wearing, and that gets me excited, so now I'm taking my glasses off.
She took her glasses off.
No, seriously. Wearing a different hat. Also, I've been a long time, the work that I do in the community and in the church is really a volunteer. Okay. Volunteer work. And of course, so I have work that also put food on my table as a civil rights facilitator for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I serve as deputy director of the coordinated care systems, and which is really the prototype for the Affordable Care Act in Massachusetts. Served as a liaison to the governor's office on affirmative market program to provide access to contracts to minorities, women, and so forth, so that they have a fair share. I would say this: we've had many, if we want to say, this is not a word that I like to use all the time, minority leaders, politicians, those who have held high positions in states, and this is not just in Massachusetts, across the board. And going back also to that, you will see that they hire less minority when they're in power, open less opportunities. And so as minorities, when we have opportunities, we're not the same way we criticize non-minorities that open doors for their own. Well, why don't we do some of that as well? Open the doors for our own. I would say this: you will have, and take you into numbers because you're a researcher. Get the data. If you see a state rep just like being elected, or a senator, minority, look at the very first people that they get around them to give the jobs, of their staff. Who is their chief of staff? I'm sorry, I get excited.
No.
You will see it's not a person of color. Now, I'm not talking about that we need to initiate, the reverse discrimination that, no, let's do of our own. But what I'm saying, we also need to lift up each other. Our priority, we have so many celebrities, so many businessmen, so many politicians who have made it so big, billionaires, trillionaires, if that's such a word, I'm supporting. You're going to look at how is that wealth trickle down, to other young men, young women who are intellectuals who have education. Well, we need to do that as self-determination.
Well, on that note,
I get excited. That gets me excited.
On that note,
Self-responsibility.
You have come to the end of our program.
Oh, no. Don't tell me I take all.
No. We will get back to this again. It's not going to be the last.
I hope before we leave we say that. So we want to look for this coming president that will help.
The time is now.
Amen.
Well,